in the shadow of an abandoned colonial fortress on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. President Ibrahim Traoré stumbled upon a discovery that would shatter the illusions of global finance. Hidden behind a reinforced wall, beneath layers of dust and cobwebs, stood a sleek metallic console unlike anything he had ever seen. Its screen, faintly glowing green, displayed a single line of text, $2.8 billion and counting. At first, Traoré assumed it was some forgotten relic of the French colonial administration, perhaps an outdated communications terminal. But as his fingers brushed across its interface, the machine responded with startling vitality. Numbers flickered rapidly, updating in real time, as if connected to a living network stretching across continents. Within seconds, he realized he had not uncovered a piece of history. He had unearthed the Reckoning Protocol. The words themselves appeared moments later, scrolling across the screen like a message from the past. Reckoning Protocol, initiated 1952. Fractional siphoning engaged. Mission: return stolen wealth. The concept was staggering. For decades, hidden beneath the noise of trillions of financial transactions, an invisible hand had been skimming fractions of pennies, amounts so small they went unnoticed by banks, corporations, and governments. Each transaction in global commerce, from Wall Street to Shanghai, from London to Lagos, carried within it a microscopic deduction. Alone, each was insignificant. Together, over 70 years, they had accumulated into a fortune beyond comprehension. The machine was not merely a ledger. It was a living system, designed to reroute ill-gotten wealth siphoned. During the colonial and post-colonial eras, the architect of this daring scheme was an obscure economist named Dr. James Worthington. Worthington had been a young prodigy at Cambridge in the late 1940s, disillusioned by the rise of global financial institutions that entrenched inequality. While the IMF and World Bank proclaimed themselves architects of prosperity, Worthington saw only new chains replacing the old ones. Colonies may have gained flags and anthems, but their economies remained tethered to European capitals. In secret, with a handful of radical mathematicians and engineers, Worthington pioneered what he called quantum banking. Long before the age of digital currency, his team understood the hidden flows of capital that pulsed invisibly through wires, telegraphs, and later computers. By exploiting rounding errors, fractional differences, and timing lags, they constructed a system capable of siphoning wealth without ever being detected. For decades, the system ran silently, embedded in the fabric of global finance. Banks unknowingly processed transactions that fed the protocol. Economists published theories about scarcity, inflation, and debt, never realizing that a parallel economy was swelling beneath their feet. By the 21st century, the Reckoning Protocol had accumulated a sum so vast it dwarfed the GDP of nations. Over $100 trillion rested in its hidden reserves, locked away in quantum vaults. Traoré's discovery came not by accident but through persistence. Rumors had long circulated about hidden colonial vaults buried beneath administrative compounds. Driven by curiosity and suspicion, he ordered explorations of old sites. When the wall was broken down and the terminal revealed, his instincts told him it was not merely treasure but truth waiting to be uncovered. He tested the system cautiously. On the first day, he authorized a modest withdrawal. Within hours, $47 million appeared in a series of accounts tied to Burkina Faso's central bank. On the second day, the sum grew to $133 million. Each transfer was clean, untraceable, and fully liquid. There were no creditors demanding repayment, no contracts, no IMF conditions. It was as though the wealth of the world had been waiting patiently for someone bold enough to claim it. News of the withdrawals leaked within days. An anonymous whistleblower inside the global banking system flagged anomalies. Money appearing from sources that did not exist. The story spread like wildfire. Traoré had access to shadow economy, and the implications were terrifying to those who relied on scarcity as their weapon. International markets convulsed. Economists dismissed it as conspiracy at first, but the sums were undeniable. Panic spread through elite circles. If scarcity was manufactured, if wealth was not limited, but abundant, then the entire architecture of debt, interest, and control could collapse overnight. The IMF convened emergency meetings. The World Bank demanded explanations. In private, the G7 leaders scrambled, fearful that developing nations would demand access to their rightful share. For ordinary people across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, however, the revelation was electrifying. For generations they had been told there wasn't enough money to build schools, to fund hospitals, to pay fair wages. Now they saw the lie laid bare. Social media exploded with a single phrase: "The reckoning has begun." Traoré, unlike so many before him, did not treat the discovery as personal wealth. He refused to vanish into secrecy or hoard the funds for his inner circle. Instead, he convened advisors and drafted what he called the new scarcity doctrine. His argument was simple. Scarcity was no longer a natural condition but a manufactured one. The reckoning protocol had proved it. The purpose of this hidden wealth was not to enrich a single nation but to liberate humanity from the myth of lack. He envisioned schools across Africa funded without foreign loans. He imagined energy grids built not from charity but from justice. He saw an Africa where young people no longer fled across deserts and seas in desperation, but stayed to build, create, and thrive. But for every dreamer inspired, a titan of finance trembled. What Traoré had tapped into was not just a fortune but a weapon, one that could destabilize the world order. Dr. James Worthington, now a forgotten figure in history, had foreseen this moment. In one of his final journals, recovered alongside the terminal's archives, he had written, "The system is not mine to own. It belongs to the future. When the right hands find it, scarcity itself will end. Until then, let it sleep in silence." For 70 years, it had slept. Now, awakened, it would not return to slumber. The global reaction split into two extremes. Some leaders called for the immediate shutdown of the system, labeling it theft, fraud, or economic terrorism. Others demanded transparency, insisting that if the protocol existed, every nation deserved access. Grassroots movements erupted worldwide. Protests in Brazil, Nigeria, and India declared solidarity with Burkina Faso. "Release the protocol" became a rallying cry painted across walls and shouted in streets. In corporate boardrooms, executives whispered of collapse. If wealth was revealed to be infinite, how could markets retain meaning? How could billionaires justify their empires? If pennies could multiply into trillions, then poverty itself was exposed as engineered cruelty. For Traoré, the weight of history pressed heavily. He knew that by withdrawing those first millions, he had crossed a line from which there was no return. The machine still sat humming in the shadows of the fortress, its numbers climbing higher with every passing second. He could touch a button and fund revolutions, rebuild nations, or topple empires. Yet he also knew the dangers. If mishandled, the reckoning protocol could unleash chaos, currencies collapsing, markets imploding, nations turning on one another in desperation. It was both salvation and apocalypse in a single machine. 2 days after his second withdrawal, Traoré addressed his nation in a televised speech. His words were measured, his tone solemn. "What we have discovered is not merely money. It is proof that scarcity is a lie. For decades, our people were told to endure poverty while the wealth of the world was hidden from us. That time is over. We stand not at the edge of crisis, but at the dawn of justice. The reckoning belongs to all humanity." Whether the world would allow such justice to unfold remained uncertain. Armies could be mobilized. Coups could be staged. Sanctions could be imposed. Yet the truth, once revealed, could never be buried again. In dusty corridors once built to chain Africa, a machine now whispered freedom. Its numbers ticked upward, relentless, indifferent to fear or power. $2.8 billion and counting. $2.9 billion and counting. $3.0 billion and counting. The reckoning had begun, and nothing could stop it.